openly against God. Um, let me ask you, brothers. You know, all of you have been in the church for a long time. Welcome, sister. Um, how do you, or what do you know? How did the first sin begin? How did it start to grow in Lucifer's heart when he was in heaven? Any thoughts about that as we enter into the lesson?
Pride, jealousy,
Mm-hmm.
wanting power.
Yeah. All right.
He was perfect, so how did that happen?
He was perfect. So how did that happen? Yeah.
There is, I have heard this, that they say one of the definitions of sin is also it's a mystery, and that's what you have made mention, that he was perfect, and how did sin come into him? And that's why it's a mystery. And I think somehow I read it, I just forget where it is, and they said that to give an explanation for sin is also giving a way to excuse it. And that's the reason we will really never be able to understand how did it happen that a perfect individual came up with a scenario like that. That's why
Yeah.
it's a story.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Jose Luis, Donovan, you guys have any thoughts about how did it begin to go wrong?
It's very difficult to answer that question because, like everybody said, it was a perfect environment. How did he create or cultivate that thought? He was perfect. He didn't. There was no reason to do something different, like thinking about being better than anything else, or better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it has also something to do with freedom of choice.
Yes, too.
Because once the choice is there, there is always a possibility. There is, but as what we said, it's still a mystery. It's still a question to us, because even though there is a choice, when everything's perfect, somehow we just cannot justify it.
Yeah. And if we were able to explain it away, then would we be justifying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I going back to what Rodney said, it is a mystery. In fact, First Thessalonians, I just looked it up. First Thessalonians 2:7 talks about exactly that, the mystery of iniquity. And there's only two mysteries in the Bible, really: the mystery of iniquity and the mystery of godliness. So the mystery of iniquity is, how did Satan become Satan? Well, it's a mystery. We don't know. It originated with him. How, if he was perfect, that is the mystery. How, we don't know. Because if he was perfect, then how it happened. But the Bible does speak about that mystery. Then the other mystery is the mystery of godliness. God himself is a mystery. How do we understand God? How did he originate? Well, God had no beginning. Well, we're not accustomed to knowing anything without a beginning. So it is a mystery, both the mystery of iniquity and the mystery of godliness, that the Bible speaks of that. So, as Rodney said, we may try to explain it as an excuse, but it really is not an excuse. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a mystery. It is. The Bible explains it is a mystery. You try to explain it, you're not going to come up with a satisfactory answer. It is a mystery.
Yeah. And I go back many times to this whole concept of our minds being finite, right? Our minds have a limit. It's like a limiter on a car. You cannot go past the speed. We cannot go past understanding how something could not have a beginning, or how could a perfect being allowed these bad feelings to grow in him. And so it is a mystery. Donovan, can you allow me to share the lesson? There's a pastor that the lesson is talking about. There's a pastor that was talking about a sermon on pride, and And at the end, the sister says, Pastor, I think I've committed the sin of pride. And the pastor was like, really? So how did that happen? He's like, well, I spent 2 hours in the mirror admiring my beauty. And then the pastor said, well, that's not a sin of pride. That was a sin of imagination. I don't know how well that pastor did after that, but that's how the lesson kind of begins. Let me pull it up here for us 1 second. Okay. I don't know that I would dare to say that to a sister, but anyway, I think it's part of the story, right? So we get into the lesson, doom of the nations. So this quarter we've been talking a little bit about Isaiah and some of the things that were happening in those times. Now it is interesting to note that the kingdom of Babylon was in power some 1,700 years before Jesus. And that was sort of like the original kingdom of Babylon. After that, so if you could imagine the map where Iraq and Iran is currently right now, that was kind of like the kingdom of Babylon. And to the north, going up to a little bit of where Turkey might be now, was the kingdom of Assyria. So during those times, the year 1716, 1900, and going down, the kingdoms of Assyria and Babylon, they were going back and forth a couple of times. Now, during the time of Isaiah, who probably lived in the 8th century before Jesus, the kingdom of Assyria was the kingdom that was dominating the whole area, and of course Judah and all of that. So when Isaiah was writing this, the kingdom of Babylon, or what they later called the Neo-Babylonic kingdom, which really came into power around the year 630, 650, was not really a big threat to the nation of Israel at that time. But even then, the book of Isaiah, and starting in chapter 10 and in chapter 13, is really talking a lot about the kingdom of Babylon. And of course, later on in Revelation, when we're talking about kingdoms falling, they really equate the kingdom of Babylon with wickedness and something that is going against God. So if we read the book of Isaiah, especially chapter 13, we really get into some pretty heavy duty warnings against the kingdom of Babylon. And so what I like to do is maybe read a little bit of that so that we can start to get an idea for what is happening here. Am I sharing? Did it change to the Bible now here, or did it stay on the lesson?
Bible.
Bible. Okay, very good. So here we go in the book of Isaiah, chapter 13, verses 2. Lift up a banner on the high mountain, raise your voice to them, wave your hand that they may enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for my anger, those who rejoice in my exaltation. The noise of a multitude of the mountains, like that of many people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the army for battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, the Lord of his weapons of indignation to destroy the whole land. And let me show you, let me push up ahead a little bit. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a mortal more rare than fine gold, and a man more than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth will move out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts and in the day of his fierce anger. God is getting upset here. It shall be as a hunted gazelle and as a sheep that no man takes up. Every man will turn to his own people, and everyone will flee to his own land. Everyone who is found will be thrust through, and everyone who is captured will fall by the sword. Their children are their children also will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered and their wives ravished. Other versions say here, and their wives raped. Whew. God is speaking pretty heavily. Does it seem to you that God is angry here? Why is he speaking so boldly against these nations? Even to the point of killing the children and their wives being ravished or raped. I mean, wouldn't innocent people also suffer here? What do you guys make of the wrath of God here?
Well, I think we go back again to what was it Isaiah who called it the strange act of God? Is that what we find? I think the lesson refers to it.
I can't remember if it's in Isaiah, but yes.
Yeah,
Strange act of God.
it is. Let me see, which I think is a Thursday part of the lesson. Yeah, Isaiah 28:21. Where the Bible speaks. I mean, because it is unconscionable for me to think of a loving God allowing to the destruction of children and innocent people, and to make sense of it, it's difficult. I mean, how, regardless of whether they lived in Babylon or they lived in whatever country they live, or as evil as a country might have been, or their leaders might have been. Children are innocent people, and they have no say on what happens around them, and yet they were also innocent. Their lives were destroyed. The same thing as we see now in many parts of the country, and even in this country. So the way to reconcile in my own mind is bring Isaiah 28:21, the strange act, under something that is not understandable. We could explain it. We will try to explain it. But at the end of the day, how can you reconcile it? I just find it difficult to do so.
Yes, as God is speaking against the nations, he is really talking about destroying everything, right? And of course, destroying the innocent too. Any other thoughts about this whole concept that when God deals with the nations that were against Israel, he's really going to destroy everything there? Any other thoughts?
We have also to understand in the perspective that most of the time, these things are actually the results of what people are doing. It's just a reaping of what was sown. But our perspective is sometimes we cannot reconcile it because we look at God as a God of love that will not let innocent somehow suffer together with the unrighteous or with the wicked. But we have also to understand that in this perspective, we can see that this pronouncements that was made by God was actually what people are now pursuing in terms of their carnal nature. Just like what happens in our days right now, we are looking at it as, oh, this is the fulfillment of prophecy that's happening in our situation that was already spoken before. But we have to understand that what is happening in our situation is not actually is not being done because there was a prophecy, but rather there was a prophecy because this is what is going to happen in the future in our present situation. So the way I look at it is, um, there is something that's going to happen, and we know that God is the source of everything. And even the evil that comes to this world, the Bible's perspective is when it happens, it is because God somehow permits it. It's He's not the one who's responsible for it. Well, I'm not talking about the judgment eventually that will happen. I am talking about the thing that, okay, what is happening in our situation right now, putting it into a perspective like that is, we are doing the things for ourselves. This is the result of man's, however we're going to explain it. It is because of pursuit of power or whatsoever. And we cannot avoid that within the things that happens, there will be innocent people that will have to suffer. At some instances, God somehow protects his people, but at times, God let things go as it is supposed to be.
All right, let me finish reading the book, the 13th chapter of the book of Isaiah. So start beginning verse 17. Behold, I will stir up the meats against them. So he's still talking about dealing with the Babylonians, okay? Behold, I will stir up the meats against them, who will not regard silver, and as for gold, they will not delight in it. Also, their bows will dash the young men to pieces, and they will have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not spare children. In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation, nor will the Arabian pitch tents there, nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there. But wild beasts of the desert will lie there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will dwell there, and wild goats will caper there. The hyenas will howl in their citadels, and jackals in their pleasant palaces. Her time is near to come, and her days will not be prolonged. You may know that the city of Babylon was destroyed later on. It was a huge city. It had a beautiful river running through it. You may have heard of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. So if you were a person living in Babylon in those times when Isaiah wrote this, what would you have thought about what this prophet was prophesying about your own city? What would you have make of this prophecy when you are in the, when you are riding high in Babylon at that time? Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think the same way somebody will feel if you go to New York City and somebody's telling you that New York City will be destroyed because whatever.
I was thinking about New York also, Juan.
Yeah, you will feel the same way. Or somebody, Vegas, for example, will be destroyed, or LA will fall to the ocean. You will think that's crazy, that's lunatic. I'm sure those people in those days were no different.
Yeah.
Some might believe, but I will say that the majority will say, look at this beautiful city. How can it ever happen? It will never happen.
Yeah. Do you guys know about Babylon now, today?
Exactly what the Bible said. It happened. There's nothing there.
Exactly. Yes. As a matter of fact, when the American soldiers went into Iraq, they set up tents and sort of a command center in the ruins of Babylon. Some 20, 30 years ago, Saddam Hussein was trying to restore the ruins of Babylon. The old Babylon is close to Baghdad, and then the soldiers went in there. As a matter of fact, the the agency that is in charge of protecting these old buildings, I think is UNESCO. They were accusing the American soldiers that they did damage to old Babylon, and so right now it lays in total ruin. There's sand around, and there's absolutely nothing there. Exactly like what the Bible said here. Any thoughts about that? I mean, this came true 100%.
Well, that's another, if not a, I mean, obviously some people don't believe in absolute proof, but it makes you think, the accuracy of Bible prophecy. That while it may not be happening, we may think that it may not happen. We may not see it with our own eyes, but that gives us a reason to think that, hey, if it happened to Babylon as predicted, then the same thing has happened to what is predicted that will happen to the earth as the Bible has predicted. We may not see it with our own eyes in our own lifetime, but we as Christians, I'm sure, have the confidence that it will happen in the way that it is written, so long, of course, that it is interpreted properly instead of all this other craziness that is happening, with Bible prophecy.
Yeah.
The Bible prophecy is every president, every time there's a new president, there's some new interpretation of Bible prophecy, and so it just goes everywhere. It's kind of crazy.
I often have this thought, people back then, like the people that had the privilege of walking with Jesus, or people that had the privilege of walking with Moses or Abraham, they in those times, people were speaking directly through those prophets. But many of them missed Jesus. I mean, the Jews of the time, 2,000 years ago, they missed Jesus. And I say, how could they have missed him, But then I look at the prophecy and look at Babylon and look at exactly everything that happened. And who's more at fault? Us knowing now that what's predicted actually happened, all the prophecies of Jesus that were fulfilled in him. Who has more light? I mean, us or them? Are we just as guilty as them of missing all of these things that are happening? Why are we in this dense fog of not really giving our lives, and I'm speaking for the whole world, giving our lives to God and really believing in him? Who's more at fault, us or them? We have the prophecies that have been fulfilled.
Amen. Amen.
I don't know. Donovan has to answer. Hey, what happened to Rodney?
I know we lost him. All right, I'm going to share the lesson again so that we can go on to, I think we're on to Wednesday now or something. Tuesday, Fall of the Mountain King. All right, in response to the fall of Babylon, which frees God's people, Isaiah utters a figure against the king of Babylon. It is poetic, not meant to be literal, obviously, as it portrays dead kings greeting their new colleague in the realm of death, where maggots and worms are of his bedding, and that's pretty interesting. Hell from beneath is excited about you, as they welcome the king. To meet you at your coming, it stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from the thrones all the kings of the nation. They shall speak and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your pomp has brought you down to Sheol, and the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggots is spread under you, and worms cover you.
You know, I chuckle because, you know, when you read that, especially Isaiah 49, if this was said to him directly, to Babylon, and later, is it Nebuchadnezzar?
Mhm.
The king of Babylon?
Nebuchadnezzar II, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty strong. Hell is excited about you. That's pretty strong, you know, to meet you coming. For somebody who is thinks that he's almighty and powerful and above everybody else and above anything, I think in those poetic words, he's reminded you're basically just like anybody else. You will die like everybody else. You know, and I think that's true for anybody who is in political power or at the height of power or anyone. Um, I think they'll do well in reading these things to know that they are not above. They're not above anything or anyone. They will die just like the rest of the past dictators and princes and queens and kings. Just as the highest person ever in terms of power and the one who has nothing, all of us are we're going to end up in the same place. But to be reminded in this way, it's kind of, it seems cruel, but it's true. You know, basically he's told, you've done such evil that you're going directly to hell, basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of harsh, but I mean, I've never really paid attention to those verses until this lesson, but he was like, wow. If you had been told that, I would be like, oh my. Either I laugh about it and say, well, that's never going to happen to me. Well, it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it kind of, if you think about it, think of Saddam Hussein, for example. At one time with his rifle, the mighty, almighty Saddam in charge of Iraq, doing at his own will, killing whoever he wanted to, destroying whoever he wanted to, doing whatever he wanted to. And then to end up in the way he ended up, you know, coming out of the, what is
a hole.
Hole, you know, there. So if he wanted to rebuild, frankly, if he wanted to rebuild Babylon, I think he would have done well in reading the Bible and know what happened to the king of Babylon. Mm-hmm. And understand that, hey, you're going in the same direction. And that's probably true for any dictator out there who thinks that they are above anyone or anything, because they're going to end up like in the same faith as everybody else.
Mm. That is interesting, Juan. I hadn't thought about the idea that Saddam Hussein was in some way probably the closest to a Babylonic king that we could have had in our modern times. He was the president of Iraq, and like I said, the closest that we would have had to a king of Babylon. And he went from being the proudest man on earth and killing to being so humiliated, and the way he was captured. And he was also tried by his own very people. And he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was hung to die. Was he not? That was his punishment. There is nothing more humiliating than trying to go against God. Oh, it is so bad to go. I mean, Lucifer himself said, I am God. I sit in the seat of the gods, in the heart of the seas. And he said, so of course, Satan is the father of pride, and Satan is the father of lies. And we can contrast that with what Jesus came to show, Matthew 11:29. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. John 13:5. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with a towel with which he girded. Philippians 5:5-8. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, so as lowly as you can possibly be, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness, I thought it was a whole verse, and coming in the likeness of man, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Whew. How do we, such a difference, such a contrast between what the world through Satan present and what Jesus actually presents. There's no more opposite, poles than the meekness and the love that Jesus had for us. I mean, can you imagine you are God in heaven, and you don't think it's too much for you to become a servant here on earth, knowing the way you were going to die, and you went ahead and did that? What do you guys think of this, of the contrast between people like Saddam Hussein, people like King Nebuchadnezzar, like all of those people that have gone against God and Jesus himself? Any thoughts about this contrast?
Well, Christ has his Father's character.
Mm.
And Satan is the father of lies.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think also that as we read this and apply it to our own world now, it should remind all of us that any world leader is gonna end up in the same situation as other leaders of the past, because they try to exalt themselves to the point that above everyone else and everything else. And sometimes, unfortunately, they use God himself. Every dictator has some sort of divine mandate. You see it in North Korea. They worship the man.
Mm-hmm.
You see it even in America. He was sent by God. We use those terms, and the reality is that power, in contrast to what Jesus says here, is power is humility, total submission to the will of God, and that's not what you see with people in power. The issue of humbleness is non-existent. In fact, asking for forgiveness is unacceptable. Being humble
It's a sign of weakness.
The sign of weakness. Tears are not allowed. You are strong. You need a strong person, a strong man. Well, if we were to really look at the Christian faith, Christ is not the typical strong man that you would be elected. I mean, in this day and age, Christ himself will not be elected to any position. He will be seen as weak. Absence of his miracles, he will be seen as weak. He did not raise an army. He did not fight with weapons. He cried. He fasted. He did all of the things that we will not see in a strong man. I can tell you, it boggles my mind to see signs of Jesus 2020 and all kinds of stuff about himself. And if you really think about following Jesus in the way that Jesus is, we wouldn't be doing some of the crazy stuff that is going on in Christianity, because Jesus' humbleness is totally the opposite of what Christianity appears to be at least in America today. And you know, it's absolutely inconceivable to me to see that kind of equation between Christianity, Jesus, and what is happening, at least in the riots at the Capitol. You see Jesus 2020 all over the place. And I was thinking, would Jesus condone such a thing? You know, he did not call anyone to raise him to power. On the contrary, he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And never once, I mean, I think there's a song that said he could have called 10,000 angels to support him, and yet he didn't do any of that. Christianity is beyond this political nonsense that happens in the world. I mean, maybe that's why Christianity is losing so many adherents every year, thousands and thousands of young people not leaving the Christian faith, because what some Christians reflect is not Christian at all. Christianity, as you see from Christ, is totally the opposite. It's humbleness. It's giving up almost everything. In fact, Jesus, that's what he says. He gave up everything. He didn't even say anything about being God. He didn't equate himself with God. And yet we elevate some people to be even gods in this world, you know, that crazy stuff that's going on, that one person is going to save the world, and quantum conspiracy theories and stuff like that. It's crazy. And these people use Christianity in their belief, which is, to me at least, when you see the comparison between what Isaiah is saying and Jesus himself, is totally the opposite of what we see in the world today.
So as we continue with the study, and we contrast the pride of some of these leaders, and we contrast Jesus. If we are called to be like Jesus, what is our place in this world then?
Well, I think everybody has to determine what is our own place, right? Because I cannot dictate or tell somebody what your place is. We tend to do that. And we may disagree with some people, but we tend to tell, well, you should do A, B, C, and D. And yet some people are strongly believers in what they do as being Christian and being their call. If you looked at what happened in the Capitol, there's somebody walking in the Capitol after they stormed the Capitol with a Christian flag. And I thought, well, a Christian flag, that's interesting. Maybe to that person, that is their calling. They have to act because God is calling them to do that. So, you know, rather than exalting ourselves, I think our place is basically, to me, my place in my own view is go back to the Lord himself, go back to Jesus himself, and see what he did, how he acted, how he approached things. And sometimes even there, you find very difficult things to accept or to practice. For example, sell everything you have and give it to the poor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Turn the other cheek. If somebody slaps you, well, turn the other one. Well, I'm not sure I'm able to do that. If you look at Jesus's family values, they are totally the contrary of what we believe family values to be today. I think there was a lesson about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Ida probably doesn't remember, but we discussed that Jesus' family values in the lesson. I mean, I don't think any of us meet that standard. They're way off to our way of thinking now. You know, open the doors to the stranger. Well, none of us really do open the doors to any stranger. You know, things of that nature.
Nowadays.
Exactly. Especially now. So it is very hard to find a balance between the teachings of the Lord, today's life, and our own way of life. Especially in America, it's even more difficult. When you grow up in a small rural place in any little town, it's so easy to just open the doors to a stranger because you have nothing. Nobody has anything. Everybody's poor and everybody shares everything. But in America, it's very different. You just don't open the doors to everybody. Whoever wants to come in and out. You lock the doors. You have alarm systems. You have all kinds of things. It's just a very difficult thing to equate and you say, what is my place? Well, that's a very hard thing. It's not a simple thing to say. I mean, you look at the Bible and the lessons, and you're like, oh my goodness. I mean, it's just hard. Being a Christian is not that easy. It involves a lot of meditation and thinking, and you fall short time and time again, and then you recover again, and then you fall again, and it's like it's an up and down, of your spiritual journey.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts about the contrast between some of these kings and what Jesus calls us to, what Jesus came to show us? Any other thoughts about humbleness versus pride? We have like 10 more minutes in the lesson. Go ahead, sister. I can see you thinking.
But he proved even to his disciples that he wasn't here to overthrow a government, overthrow the Romans, but to bring people back to his Father's kingdom. It's a choice, and it's like that rich man who left running because he didn't want to sell anything that he had. Your choice is to look at the commandments, see how flawed you are, and want to be closer to God. And for that, you have to get rid of some of your feelings of self-worth, absorption, and all the things that the world tells you need.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Jose Luis, any thoughts, Donovan?
I just to practice.
Yes, it's very difficult to think the humbleness of Jesus, and sometimes we compare ourselves with our neighbors, but when we compare ourselves with Jesus, it's very difficult to even remove or watch his feet, because we are so full of pride, full of sin. We are sinners, and we cannot even get close to, like Peter said, he was so far when he compared himself to Jesus, and God help us with the Holy Spirit to be able to remove all these sins from us and our pride, and help us to be prepared for that day when we face Jesus face to face.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that, if the church truly reflected Christ's humbleness, I'm trying to imagine how different the church would look today.
Mm-hmm. Even our own leaders, right, within the church.
Even with our own church at Central, how different the church would be if we truly reflected Christ's humbleness.
It will not be.
It would certainly look different.
Yeah.
What was that, Juan?
It will surely not be empty on a Sabbath morning, right?
Yeah.
If the church was, because as I said, Jesus' family values are very different than what we think our family values are. Very, very different. But again, it's because there's a lot of pride in ourselves. And somebody said, I heard somebody say, well, are you blaming us for what happens in the church? Well, yeah, the reality is that we are at fault for what happens in anything, whether it's home or church. It is true. I think Donovan is 100% correct. The church will look very, very different. God forbid that. I mean, I think the church is evolving little by little, but not enough yet. I mean, we tend to be very accusatory and condemning of others who perhaps don't believe the same we believe, act the same way act, have the same practices they do, and yet Jesus's values were very different. We love the stories, but we don't practice any of them. You know, we love the story, for example, of the woman that was caught in sin. You know, and I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. And we try to spin that story and say we focus on that don't sin no more, and we talk to the person about their sins instead of focusing on the not condemnation. But yet we're very strong in as I said, we love the stories. And beginning with me, we just don't practice the stories, and that's the problem. If we were to practice more of the stories, we would probably be a much better and different church and different people.
Yeah, and that's one of the objectives of us studying these lessons. We continue to be reminded of what Christ would have us do, right? So we have 5 minutes to. I thought I want to read this part here. At the end of the study, they talk about Isaiah 24, where it's talking 24, 25, 26, and 27, actually. We're talking about what happens at the end. So let me just read this and hover over some of these verses here. In Isaiah 13:14, aspects of the literal Babylon apply to later powers, and the king of Babylon represents fusion of human rulers with the mastermind behind them, Satan himself. So Satan himself works with some of these rulers of great powers. So a message that Babylon is fallen, like in Isaiah, and look, here comes a chariot of men with a pair of horsemen. Then he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, can be repeated at a later time. And we all know Revelation 14:8, the message of the three angels. Babylon is fallen, that great city. And Satan is finally destroyed after Christ's second coming. Revelation 2:20, the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will torment it day and night forever and ever. While the destruction of the little Babylon was the judgment day of the Lord, another great and terrible day of the Lord is on the way. Another great and terrible day of the Lord is on the way. Revelation explains that it will actually be fulfilled in the new Jerusalem. Revelation 21:2. Then I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And the city has no need of the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God is its light, and the lamp is the Lamb. That will be a great day. So I'd like to go back to this, the first verse here. So at the end of the day, you know, we can claim this. We know that, behold, this is our God. We can claim that we have waited for him. And how do we wait for him? Do we sit idly, just waiting? I mean, if God has put a thought in your mind, if God has put a new resolve in your heart, that's how we wait for him. And he will save us. This is the Lord, not any other kingdom, not any other God, not any other lesser gods. This is our Lord. We have waited for him, and we will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. As we wait for the Lord, he has given us different gifts and different talents. As we wait for the Lord, what is the state of our waiting? How How do we wait for the Lord? Do we kind of sit there and just believe whatever we believe? And how can we not share what we have in our hearts if we have this great news that he is coming? How do we wait for the Lord? Any thoughts? How do we wait? How do you wait for the Lord?
Preparing ourselves every day and read our Bible and help ask the Holy Spirit to guide us to be prepared.
Ellen G. White talks a little bit about this. Is it by conditions that we receive salvation? Never by conditions that we come to Christ. And if we come to Christ, then what is the condition? The condition is that by living faith, we lay hold wholly and entirely upon the merits of the blood of a crucified and risen Savior. When we do that, what is she talking about? What is it that we do? Living by faith. Then we work the works of righteousness. When we do that, when we are living by faith, first we're living by faith, and then we work the works of righteousness. But when God is calling the sinner in our world and inviting him, there is no condition there. He draws by the invitation of Christ, and it is not you have not now you have got to respond in order to come to God. The sinner comes, and he comes and views Christ elevated upon the cross of Calvary, which God impresses upon his mind. There is a love beyond anything that is imagined that he has taken hold of. When the sinner comes, and he comes and views Christ elevated, who is presenting this Christ to the sinner? We, those that have been saved, we are presenting Christ elevated upon the Christ. We are presenting God and elevated to the Christ. We're not presenting ourselves. We're not presenting the church. We're not even presenting the pastor and anyone else. We are pointing these sinners to Christ elevated upon the cross of Calvary.
Yeah. You know, sometimes the problem, though, Art, is that we present doctrine as if we present Christ. And presenting doctrine is not the same as presenting Christ. We're presenting teachings, but that's not representing Christ. And sometimes we make that big mistake. It is my view that the two can actually sometimes be very, very different and separated from each other. If any of those doctrines are not representative of Christ himself, you might as well not present the doctrines. But let me go back to the day of the Lord. It is interesting to notice that in the study, the day of the Lord in Nicaea refers to the day of destruction, the end of Babylon. It will be the end. It will be the destruction day. Look, in the Bible, you find an interesting verse in Revelation. What is it? Revelation 10:1, I think. Is it Revelation 10:1? Where it says John was in the spirit. No, 1:10. Revelation 1:10. Revelation 1:10. I was in the spirit on the Lord day, or the day of the Lord. And to many people, they equate that with the first day of the week, the day of the Lord. And I mean, you find books and studies about the day of the Lord being the first day of the week. But in the Bible, the day of the Lord actually refers, not even in this particular case, it doesn't refer to the Sabbath either. You know, it says the day of the Lord was the day of destruction. So if you study the Bible then and equate the two, then the day of the Lord in Revelation 1:10 is the day of destruction. I mean, that's just a common reference to it in the Bible. So when John says, I was in the spirit on the day of the Lord, you know, some Bibles actually have translated that I was in the spirit in the first day of the week. That's not what the Bible teaches. To me, it teaches John was seeing the day of destruction, the end of times. But anyway, it's just kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, the important thing here is that we know how the story ends.
Yeah.
Right? We know how the story ends. We know that the Lord is going to decisively, like the end of the summary here says, decisively prevail and bring eternal peace to a troubled planet. So let's continue to dwell in the Lord, and let's continue to live by faith, and let's continue to allow the works of that faith to also prevail in our lives, and also sprinkle those around us with the love of Jesus. Interesting lesson, to say the least. Some things that we didn't even touch on, but thank you guys for the opportunity to be here, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
Donovan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan.